electric.
Oh, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
So, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? What your name is, where you grew up?
I'm George Landon Olson, or Lanny, your grandfather.
Yep.
I'll be 80 years old July 29th. I remember World War II because I had family in the war.
Okay.
And during the war, I had a map on the wall of the world with pins in it where different family members were located during the war.
Okay. What was your earliest memory of the war?
Earliest memory of the war was December 7th, 1941, the day the war broke out. My dad was holding my little brother, reaching up to turn the radio off. We were going to go to a movie, and they had an announcement that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And since my dad had spent 9 years in the Marine Corps, we didn't go to the movie. We stayed and listened to the reports. And the next day, on the 8th of December, was the day that President Franklin Roosevelt had his speech of the Day of Infamy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did you feel learning upon the events of December 7th?
Scared.
Scared. Okay. Why did you feel scared? Did you think that they were gonna come bomb the U.S., not just a military base, or did you think the war was gonna break out?
Of course, we didn't know.
Yeah.
We didn't know whether that was going to happen or not. But the fact that the Japanese had done the sneak attack at Pearl Harbor, and at the time, my mother's older sister, Goldia, was a nurse in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
She was on the island of Corregidor when the war broke out. She was a prisoner of the Japanese the duration of the war.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So how did you feel about Japanese immigrants in the U.S. after Pearl Harbor?
To this day, I still don't like the Japanese.
Okay.
I've
why?
forgiven the Germans,
Okay.
but I have no use for the Japanese.
Is it strictly because of the events of December 7th?
Strictly just because of the way they conducted the war, the atrocities. Not that the German didn't commit a lot of atrocities too, but the Japanese, they just wouldn't surrender. They fought to the death.
Yeah.
So they took a lot of our soldiers with them.
Baton? Baton Death March?
Well, yes. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, they attacked the Philippines the same day.
Yeah.
Okay? And it took 4 months for the Japanese to be able to conquer the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when my aunt was captured, made a prisoner, and they were forced over a 65-mile death march called the Bataan Death March to the prisoner of war camps, which is where she spent the rest of the war.
Okay. Do you know about like the internment camps for Japanese throughout the U.S.?
I do know about, where all the Japanese in the U.S. were rounded up and sent in. Matter of fact, there's a camp down here in southern Oregon.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
That was a Japanese internment camp.
How did you feel about those camps? Did you support them? Were you scared?
Well, I was so young. I was only 6 years old. So, the fact that they were being rounded up because we thought that they were all going to be
Spies.
spies or saboteurs or whatever during the war.
Okay. What was your earliest memory of Hitler and Nazism?
Well, earliest memory, Hitler declared war on the U.S. when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember that we were now involved in both our East Coast and West Coast of the U.S. fighting wars across the seas.
Two different fronts.
I had my dad's younger brother was killed in the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge was in late 1945, I believe. Let me look at my notes.
Take your notes.
145.
Battle of the Bulge, 1944. It was December 16th of 1944 to January 25th of 1945.
44.
Yeah, 45.
Okay.
And it was the biggest offensive of the war by the Japanese or by the Germans,
Mm-hmm.
and it was done in the Ardennes forest, the Ardennes Mountains, which is Luxembourg, Belgium, and they were trying to get to the seaport of Antwerp.
Mm-hmm.
And there was 250,000 German troops against 80,000 U.S. troops. And we didn't have many troops in the area because it was a forested area, a mountain area, and we didn't think that they would be able to mount an offensive through that part of the country.
Okay.
So we didn't have it manned very strongly.
And you said you had a family member there? Who was that?
I'm sorry?
You had a family member in the Battle of the Bulge?
My dad's younger brother, Glenn, my Uncle Glenn,
Okay, cool.
was killed in the Battle of the Bulge.
Okay.
Yes.
So how old were you when that happened? 3?
7, 8.
7, 8, okay.
Well, let's see. By that time in the war, I was 9 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember a funeral or anything for him?
Do I remember his funeral? Yes.
Was it sad?
They had a service when we were notified by the Defense Department that he'd been killed. We had a service for him, and then when his body was brought back, we had another service for him, and he's buried in a cemetery at Hayfield, Minnesota.
Okay.
What did he do? What was his job?
Well, he was a sergeant in Patton's army. What his specific job was, I don't know, but he was
That's fine.
in a tank corps.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
That helps. So how did you and your friends at school or in other places perceive the war? Like, did you guys play war games? Did you guys talk about it? Or did you guys just know it's a touchy subject and leave
well,
it?
there was a number of things that I remember. Because my dad owned a grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
there were rationing stamps for
Yeah,
food
yeah.
and gasoline and
Mhm.
so forth. And I remember as students in school, we had little books that were buying war bonds.
Yeah, yeah,
And we'd collect dimes or quarters or whatever and stick them in little slots
yeah.
to buy the war bonds. And that was our way of
Supporting the war. Okay.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, how did you and your family perceive Hitler? Were you scared of him? Did you know who he was? Did you know like the extent of what he was doing, or did you just kind of have a cloudy idea of it?
Would you repeat that?
So you talked about this a little bit earlier, like perceiving Hitler.
Yeah.
Were you scared of him? Did you not know what he was doing? Did you know about like concentration camps and
Oh
anything
yes, oh yes. Remember, see, when you would go to the movies during the war, they would have war clips before the movie started.
like that? Okay.
And so that was a way to know what was going on.
Keep up to date
They
on
never actually showed the blood and guts of the war. They just showed, and told about where we were and what was going on and so on and so forth. But when they liberated the concentration camps and you saw all the dead bodies piled up and the crematoriums and the emancipated skeletons that were still living, it was pretty bad. Then you become totally aware of what was going on.
Did that make you angry or upset at all?
Yes, it would make you angry, it would make you mad, it would make you want to be in the military and be there.
Okay. Let's see. So
My
like,
father-in-law was also involved in the war. He retired as a colonel from the Army, but he was a captain of the Army Corps of Engineers detachment in the Aleutian Islands. The Aleutian Islands were the only part of the U.S. the Japanese had invaded and had troops on. And it was in the island of Kiska in the Aleutian chain and the island of Attu in the Aleutian chain that he was involved in.
okay.
The Japanese landed their troops with submarines and they bombed Dutch Harbor, which is basically on the Alaska mainland, and then you have the chain of islands that stretch out.
Okay.
They're the closest point to the Japanese islands that we had any U.S. facilities during the war.
Okay.
But he was in charge of the detachment of Army Corps of Engineers that actually defeated the Japanese on Attu.
Okay.
Okay? He's received a Silver Star for that work.
Can you explain like what the Silver Star is?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain like how prestigious the Silver Star is?
Never heard how he actually received it,
Mhm.
but we know that he saw a lot of action. And then after the Battle of the Aleutian Islands,
Mhm.
he went on and was involved in battles in the Pacific, where we had Okinawa, Iwo Jima. I remember a lot of those battles because the Marines were involved, and my dad had been a Marine, and so we watched those very closely.
Okay.
But they were the last two islands that, before we invaded the Philippines and got back into the Japanese, where we were bombing the mainland.
Okay. Do you remember?
Ask him again.
What's the difference
So how
between
prestigious is the Silver Star?
Yeah.
Silver Star is the third highest award that a soldier can receive.
Okay.
And he
Okay.
was nominated for another.
Yeah. Can you talk about
I'm
the
sorry?
medal,
He
the
was
Medal of Honor?
nominated for this
Yeah, he was nominated for the Congressional Medal of Honor,
Okay.
but received the Silver Star instead.
Where's the Congressional Medal of Honor?
That's the highest honor you can receive
Mhm.
as a military soldier.
Okay.
Where's the Purple Star? I've heard of the Purple Star.
Purple Heart.
Well, Purple Heart,
Oh, wounded.
okay,
That's a
Purple
wound,
Heart is for a battle injury.
Okay.
Okay, those that were injured in battle receive a Purple Heart. That's a very high prestigious award too. Obviously, if you're killed, you get the Purple Heart. But if you had any injury in battle, you also receive Purple Heart.
Did he receive a Purple Heart?
Did he
Did
receive a
he-
Purple
yeah.
Heart? No.
Okay. So he wasn't injured at all then?
He wasn't injured physically, but mentally, he didn't come back the same guy.
So when he came back, how was he different? Was he angry? Just seeming distant?
And we're talking about Dan Dandy, your father now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since I didn't know him before,
Mhm.
I couldn't tell you what the difference was.
But his sister said,
Uh,
his sister said they
Mhm.
sent back the wrong man.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
PTSD was not known enough.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
What
I
were-
remember
your grandpa.
Eddie Slovak. Eddie Slovak was a private in the U.S. Army.
That was terrible.
He was the only soldier in the U.S. Army that was executed during World War II
Mm-hmm.
for leaving his station.
Deterring.
And he
Okay.
was not.
Okay,
right.
General Eisenhower ordered his execution.
And
It
why?
was terrible.
What, he left because of what? reason?
Desertion.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't, he had an IQ of about 40.
Oh.
How did you feel about that? Were you upset learning upon this, or
Well,
kind of indifferent?
desertion is pretty serious
Yeah.
in the military
Yeah.
because you're putting the rest of the unit at risk.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Did he desert in Europe or? And
that was in Europe.
And he was executed on American soil?
No,
Oh.
he was executed over there.
He
Tied
was.
to a stake and shot.
Oh, he was ordered by the president in
No,
America
ordered by Dwight Eisenhower.
to be executed there in Europe.
Yes, he
Wow.
was. Yeah,
If you want to see
firing
the story-
squad.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. What?
If you want to see the story, there is the execution of Private Slovak
That's a movie.
on film.
Okay.
You can get it, and it tells that he was not mentally even adept enough to be in the service.
Mhm.
He was trying to get away, as I remember, he was trying to get away to go to his wife, his girlfriend,
Oh, okay.
He's
trying
like
to
a
get away
child.
to her, and that's why they said he had deserted.
IQ 40 is pretty
Yeah,
pretty
that's a
low.
little early.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
In the
Oh,
Battle of
I
the
don't know
Bulge.
if it was that low, but,
Yeah,
you know,
but low.
it was very, very low.
Okay.
In the Battle of the Bulge,
Mm-hmm.
there was a town that the Allies, which are U.S. soldiers and other
British, French, all those.
countries
Yeah.
that are allied with us, kept, and it was called Bastogne.
Yeah.
And Bastogne was surrounded by the Germans, and we supplied it by airdrop. And it wasn't until Patton's army came in from the north and Omar Bradley's army came in from the south to liberate Bastogne from the Germans and push the Bulge back. And after that, the German soldiers were on the run and were
On the
back in
defensive.
their own country, and they
Okay.
were defeated.
Okay.
They were
God.
surrendering to the Allies by the hundreds of thousands because they didn't want to be captured by the Russians.
Yeah. Okay.
Where was Bastogne? Geographically, where is it?
France.
Belgium.
It's,
One of those.
Right.
Okay, so earlier you said you forgave the Germans. Why is that?
Well, probably because they're Caucasian, number one. Okay, that's
To be
probably
honest.
part of it. But I think the other part of it is they seem to be more humanistic in the fact that if they realized that they were defeated, they would surrender.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese would not.
Okay.
Okay, I remember there was one of the islands where the U.S. soldiers, and mostly in the Pacific, it was the U.S. Marines that captured island after island.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't the Army that was involved. It was the U.S. Marine Corps. And maybe one of the reasons why I joined the Marine Corps later. Okay, but at that particular point in time, Japanese had convinced the civilians on some of these islands that when the Americans invaded, they jumped off cliffs into the ocean committing suicide.
Wow.
Civilians and soldiers,
Taking babies with them.
Wow.
by the hundreds.
So is that okay?
The Americans were cannibals, that's what they were told.
Yeah. Okay. So you say you forgave Germans, but like during this time when you were still a young kid, how did you feel about German immigrants in the U.S.? Were you kind of not scared of them, but just kind of worried?
Wasn't worried about the Germans here.
Okay.
Really wasn't thought of.
Okay.
Because there've been a lot of Germans that had been immigrants to the U.S.
yeah.
for many, many years.
Okay.
So it really wasn't thought of. I'm not sure why I feel so bad about the Japanese. I think it's probably just the way they treated our soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Baton Death March that my aunt was in, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if a guy fell down, they bayoneted him, you know,
It was a
killed
65
him with a
mile walk.
bayonet.
Yeah.
They were just committed all kinds of atrocities.
I mean, 65 miles can take 2 months, maybe?
No.
No? How long would it take? That's a lot.
Well, when you're, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I read at one point that there was a body every 15 feet.
Wow.
Because
Okay.
I'm sure they weren't being fed or getting any water, you know.
They were pampered.
They were prisoners,
Yeah.
so.
Well, the Japanese treated the prisoners early in the war. They gave them medicine, they gave them
Oh.
food, so on and so forth. But as the war progressed, they gave them less and less and less.
A little like less
And
inhumane.
forced them
almost.
into forced labor and so
Mhm.
on and so forth. The bridge over
River
The
Kwai.
River Kwai.
the River Kwai was all built by U.S. prisoners of war.
Okay.
And there's a film on that you can have access to.
Where is that bridge?
It's in Burma, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, Burma.
So how are you finding out about all of this? Like about the bulge and the bridge that you were just talking about.
I remember that.
Well, did you hear it like through radio, television?
Oh, yes. Well, television didn't exist.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, like
so
the
you heard
movies,
it-
you said like there was clips before.
You'd hear it all either by radio or when you'd go to the movies.
Mhm.
And in those days, as a kid, almost every Saturday afternoon I went to the movie.
Time
Okay.
marches on.
Time
marches on.
Yeah, you'd go to the movies. Basically, I went to the movies because I wanted to see the war clips.
Yeah. Okay. So that was like your way of staying involved.
I was very involved because of having family members in it and keeping track on my map where they were and so on and so forth.
Can you tell me more
Now,
about
my
that?
aunt, who was a prisoner of the Japanese, I can remember our family, my mother and dad and brother and sister and I, sitting down having dinner and having the nightly news on the radio,
Mm-hmm.
and they interviewed, I'm getting chills on my arm.
It's okay.
We had the radio on, and they announced they were interviewing a young man who had liberated a Japanese prisoner of war camp, and his sister was a prisoner of war.
Wow.
It was my uncle and my aunt.
Wow.
My
Wow.
aunt's younger brother was in the liberation party of the camp that she had been a prisoner of war.
And she was the same one that was in the
She was a naval nurse,
okay.
yes.
And she was in the
Oh,
Philippines. Yeah, she was in the Philippines, right?
She was in the Philippines as a naval nurse when the war broke out,
Okay.
and was on Corregidor for the 40-some days that it stood, and then was in the march to the Bataan Peninsula, which took 4 months before they surrendered to the
Mhm.
Japanese, and that's when the Bataan Death March started to the prisoner of war camps. About 4 months, 5 months after the war started.
Didn't she marry a survivor of the camp too?
What?
Didn't she, Goldie, marry a survivor of the
Yeah,
camp?
she married another prisoner after the war who was an American pilot that had been shot down. Was a prisoner of war camp also.
Wow.
And they ended up living their life out in Apple Valley, California, down in the
Okay.
desert,
Yep.
because they couldn't live anywhere else because of their health.
Really.
Didn't have any children, but she lived to be 90-some years old.
Jeez.
Ask me again about the map.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about the map? Like how you kept track of family members?
Where'd you get the map?
Tell you more about the map?
Yeah. Basically, just like to explain what it was.
It was a map that was probably 3 feet by 3
the
feet
world map.
of the world.
Okay.
Yeah, world map. And I had little pins with red bulbs on the end of them, and that I would stick in the map as to where people were that we knew about at that particular time. Now, my aunt that was a prisoner of the Japanese, we didn't know she was alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we thought she had long since been killed.
Yeah.
To find out that she was alive was really startling.
It's pretty cool.
Then, toward the end of the war,
Mm-hmm.
we had the atomic bomb,
Yeah.
and I remember those also. Nagasaki, Hiroshima. How did I feel about it?
Yeah.
I wished we'd have used more.
Really.
Yes. Earlier.
Yeah. You think it would have ended the war earlier?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So you're pretty.
And it was a real race between us coming up
Yeah.
with an atomic bomb or the Germans.
Yep.
The Germans were working on one,
Mhm.
and a matter of fact, it was the German scientists that ended up coming
To the
here
US.
after the war
Yep.
that helped develop the atomic bomb.
Werner von Braun.
Yes.
So
So, Dad, when you first heard Goldia and her brother on the radio, was that the first indication you had that she was still alive?
Yep.
and you were sitting down with your family eating dinner.
Yeah.
So that
This was a,
And the baby brother that helped liberate the camp, he didn't know his sister was in that camp.
No.
That was just coincidence.
Yes.
Wow.
absolutely amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
God given.
So how often did your parents like show their worries or talk about the war with you?
I'm sorry.
How often did your parents talk about the war with you? Because you were saying that you were listening to the radio at dinner. Was it pretty like a normal thing to do? Was listen?
Well, we listened to the radio every day.
Okay.
We'd listen to the radio every day about what the war was doing on both the Pacific and the European theaters.
Gabriel Peter,
It was on everybody's mind
of course.
Mm-hmm.
pretty much all the time, as I remember during the war, at least for my family.
Yeah. Were there any families that weren't very involved, or was everyone pretty paying attention, knowing what was going on?
Everybody seemed to be paying attention. Now, when you think of how much attention I paid to it, I paid quite a bit of attention to it.
Yeah.
But yet, Grandpa, your grandmother, was pretty much sheltered from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wasn't allowed to know what was going on,
Right.
even though her dad was involved.
We had the access to the films
Mm-hmm.
in the theater, newsreels as well. But my mother was very concerned about us being terribly affected by it.
Mhm.
So she didn't talk to us much about what was going on. She heard from Dad
What was
quite
happening?
regularly. Yeah.
Were you in Alabama? Were you in Mobile when all that
We
went
were
on?
outside of Washington D.C. in a little town called Leesburg
Okay.
that used to be, well, one time was the capital, and all the men, practically all the men, were gone from town because, except for bankers and grocers and that sort of thing. And we children just had the run of the town, so it was just really idyllic for children.
So what was that like, knowing that like men in the community were gone at war?
Like what?
That men in the community were gone at war?
Well, we didn't feel safer or not safer or anything like
Just
that.
felt the same.
We just accepted that.
So it was just like life, basically.
Yes, but then, one of the things that Grandpa Lanny was talking about is not just rationing, but we saved all the grease
Mm-hmm.
from all the meats
Yeah.
and turned it in to make explosives.
Wow.
And we had to just really watch what we ate and
Mhm.
when we ate it, like rationing. I can remember we had a mother had fixed a baked chicken.
Uh-huh.
It was on the door of the oven, cooling down a little, and our dog got it.
Oh.
But and that was the end of that. But
And were you rationing because you were afraid, or there
No,
really
they
wasn't
had to,
enough?
they
You
had
had
to.
to.
Legally.
there were little
Oh.
ration books that we had.
You had like a
for
little
meat.
booklet and you had to like tear it out and like that's how you,
Yeah, you had to turn them in.
Because they were afraid they'd run out, or
because they were running out.
It
The
was-
soldiers had to eat
all,
too.
all the food was going
Yeah.
overseas.
Ah.
There was like a lack of wheat products and like did you guys have to like recycle cans and
Yes,
tin?
yes, yeah.
You couldn't buy nylons
No.
that you ladies are
Yeah.
used to because it was all being used for parachutes.
Yeah.
So when
Okay?
you went to church on Sunday, there was just the mothers and the children, and the men aren't present. for the
Well,
most
that
Older
I
men,
didn't. I was in the choir. The church was right across the street, and it's very old, 200-year-old, 300-year-old church. But it was General Marshall's church. His flag was hanging in the church, and but he was, of course, off doing
Yeah.
war stuff. But I was in the
General-
choir.
General Marshall was here in Washington D.C. during the war, but he was the chief of staff of the military. So he was in charge of Eisenhower and Patton and
Yeah, yeah.
all of the admirals and everybody. He was
He was the
in
brain.
charge of the whole
Yes.
thing.
But he was here. He was in.
But his church was across the street from where
Yeah.
Grant Patton lived.
And we used to play around the church and all that. No, we were just kids. We were allowed to be children, and it was actually a lovely time, despite the fact that there was all this hideousness
Mhm.
going on.
Yeah.
But I feel I still have trouble forgiving the Japanese for the same reasons,
Mhm.
and because my dad was there.
Mhm.
I mean, he did tell us a couple of things that he didn't actually, veterans don't like to talk to anybody
Yeah.
other than veterans about their experiences, but Dad told us a couple of really ugly things, and not meaning to scare us or anything, but just give us an idea of what he went through. But he did take a volcanic stone that
Mhm.
was on Attu
Uh-huh.
and take it to Japan to give it to the people there who were having not a celebration, but a memorial
Mhm.
for the dead,
Yeah.
and they put it at the base
Really.
of this memorial.